Hello and welcome back, teachers, to Teachers Help Teachers. I'm your host, Esther Yoon, and with me today again is Amanda Campos. Welcome to the
Hi.
program, Amanda. Thank you for joining us again. Those of you who follow us on Teachers Help Teachers, you might remember Amanda from a previous episode where she presented coding and its wonderful contributions to math thinking in our learners. If you didn't check it out, I'd highly recommend it. I'm personally very, very proud of that episode because of this wonderful teacher
Thank you.
before us. You're welcome. So Amanda is here today to help us step by step to convert or change our gradebook, online gradebook, to mastery learning. And those of you who don't use Schoology, because that's the platform we are going to use. It's the reason being is because it's linked directly to our report cards. So it just makes sense to input our grades on Schoology. But if you use a different reporting platform or grading platform, please see if you can transfer this content to what you are using.
And where we want to start is in grade setup. So on the left-hand side, clicking down to grade setup, and then this is essentially what you will see. And over here, these are the different types of scales and grading that LAUSD uses. And we're going to go ahead and add. We're going to add a scale, and this is where we can put in the mastery learning. It automatically starts on percentage. You want to switch that over to points. And points being because at the elementary level, we use 4, 3, 2, 1. If you're in the secondary level, stick with percentages. I would recommend that. But for elementary purposes, we're going to start with points. We're going to name our scale Mastery Learning. And then this is where we put our points in. So a 4 would be mastered or mastery, whichever verbiage you prefer. 3, we would end up with proficiency.
And you add the level every time you put in a new level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not spelling correctly at the moment. Too early for me.
Thank goodness for auto spell, right?
Yeah. Approaching proficiency would be a 2. And then we would add the 1 in, and that would be, what did we say, low proficiency?
Sure.
And again, you can use whatever verbiage you want, but for purposes of this is the verbiage we're using, and just save changes. So our default on LAUSD is the numeric scale. So you can change that by right here, your gradebook scale, and then you can hit mastery learning. Same thing in both of them. And then you want to read through all of these because they really do pertain to individual classrooms and what you're trying to hide from the students versus what they can see. We discussed hiding the overall column because a downside to this is that they do use, it does average things out. So if you don't want you can go in as a teacher and override that. But I hide the overall column for parents and students so that they're just looking at each individual assignment rather than the collective, and just save changes. And then you want to also make sure that you've added your categories. So typically these are what you want to see on the report card. So I only have math at the moment, but you would go ahead and add, and you could do ELA. I also, just a tidbit on my end, I do ELA and writing separate because there is a writing standard, and the ELA standard is a little bit more complex. So when we get into the learning targets and those kinds of things, it's easier to have the ELA and writing separated.
Sure.
Off the bat.
I like to, under categories, put all the report card um, subjects.
Absolutely. I agree.
That way it transfers a little bit easier. So yeah,
I agree.
yeah, sure. Either
100%.
way, either
So
way.
this would be where we would start in terms of like actually setting up the grade book, because you need it there in order to create assignments. So from here, um, if you were going to add an assignment, we would go to add materials. You would decide what kind of assignment it would be, whether it was a discussion question, an assessment or test, or just an assignment, perhaps math, something you're dropping in from Google, any of those things. So I'm going to name this one math. And Esther, if you want to help me out on this part.
Sure. Since I teach first grade, I'll give you a first grade learning target. That's my learning target. So I was thinking about how do I set up my grade book so that it communicates mastery learning further, because mastery learning has that mastery, proficiency, approaching proficiency, low proficiency as grades, but then there's a number attached to it, right? 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, without that language, it's hard to interpret what does 4, 3, 2, 1 mean. And then 4, 3, 2, 1, mastery, proficiency to what, right? Well, that's linked to my learning target. So I would argue that it's important to communicate with the students, with the parents, what our learning target was for that standard. And so under the description, it would be an appropriate place to put your learning target for that standard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then going off of that, so this category, adding that in would be dropping it into the correct placement for report card purposes,
Mm-hmm.
and just organization. If I had logged out of Schoology and went back in, this would automatically be on Mastery Learning, because that was a change that I saved. But
Yes.
because I didn't get out of it and go back in, it was still on numeric. So we will change that to Mastery Learning. And then here, we're going to align the learning target and the learning objective. And really the objective in terms of LAUSD is the standard. So this is my learning target. I'm going to hit align, custom learning objective, school, LAUSD report card. Thankfully, it's the only one that comes up. Mm-hmm. And then I would pick the standard based on the type of target that I have. So in this case, we're looking at math content.
Yes.
K to 6. And then I would pick grades 1 to 2. And then Esther, this is when I'll need your help because I teach third. So look at different standards.
Yeah. Is there an OA? Is OA, if you can scroll, is OA there?
Operations and algebraic thinking.
Yes.
And you can see when you read through them, if you need the extra time, feel free to read through these. But you can see in grade 1, understand and apply properties of operations and the relationship between addition and subtraction, and add and subtract within 20. So that's definitely aligned. And we're just going to hit add learning objective. And now when I go here, I can see that that is already aligned right here. This is the one I wanted. And if I accidentally click the wrong one, I'd hit the X, it would go away. Or if I wanted to align more than one standard, let's say I wanted to go ahead and add a math practice. This trail up here is really a breadcrumb trail, so you can just kind of go right back through instead of clicking all the way from the beginning. I can go back to that LAUSD report card, go back to a math practice, and pick one of those, and then it would put the score in both of those objectives.
Wonderful.
For the report card.
Wonderful. And in any good math lesson, it wouldn't just be one of those practices, but several, maybe even all, depending on what your objective is or depending on what your lesson is about. Yes. So let's wrap up, Amanda. Thank you. Thank you for that setup. Was there anything more to share before we wrap up?
I'm just gonna suggest that for those of us that aren't using Schoology in terms of assignments and just want to drop the grade in, you can go to Gradebook. So you would do grade setup the exact same way, but you would go to Gradebook and then you would hit this plus and add a grade column. So those of us, especially those of us in the lower grades who are using other platforms or other things in order for grading, this way you can just drop. So same thing. It doesn't have the learning target in it, but you would align the standard the same way, and you would still use the mastery learning. And then you could drop your grades in. Oh, sorry. You could drop your grades in right here for each kid. So that way you're still hitting mastery learning, you're still organized and ready to go for report cards, but you're not necessarily using Schoology for any assignments.
Yeah, and
So it can be used as a twofold.
sure. And if I can clarify too, I don't use Schoology for a learning platform. I use it as a grade book. But I still go to materials just so that I can add the learning targets. I think it's really, really important to be very clear and thorough about their grades, because it is feedback, it is
Mm-hmm.
their communication, and boy, don't we need that more than ever during this time of remote learning.
Absolutely. Because parent questions seem to be, parents are definitely asking a lot more questions, I feel like. And it really helps to have that, like you suggested, it really helps to have that learning target to say, like, in that shuffle, when I have an emergency question, I'm like, oh, okay, this is what we were looking at, and this is why the grade is the way it is.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah, and then under the description too, I think I would also quickly describe the title of the activity that's linked to my assignment, just so that they know, oh, this is what she's referring to, and
Yes.
whatnot.
Yeah. Great point.
So, final thoughts, Amanda. Why is this important to change our grade book this way?
So
I
I
have
think
some
that
thoughts. What about you?
I think that just first and foremost, it just helps that communication between parents and us instead. So they are able to see it, it's more, not only is it user friendly language, but it really makes more sense. Like, oh, I've mastered this aspect. I'm working on in proficiency on this aspect. And using that language with the kids as well. So it really is just an open opportunity to see, this is where I'm at, and this is where I'm moving towards, or this is what I would like. It gives reason to those numbers in my sense. Like, I think that those numbers, sometimes we discuss, this can be arbitrary, what really is a 4 and what really is a 3, and it makes cohesion between the grades. If we're using this type of mastery learning between the K-5 system, then when they get to third grade and they get a 4, it means the same thing as a 4 in first grade, and sometimes that doesn't always happen with those arbitrary numbers.
Agreed. And to add to that, um, I think it also engenders. I picked
Mm-hmm.
up that word during the
Yep.
mastery learning training, but it engenders growth mindset, because
Yep.
for those students who are approaching proficient or proficient, where they haven't mastered that standard yet, oh, okay, um, I I'm going to have opportunities to to show my growth. And that's the thing as teachers, that we have to be very aware, put it in the forefront of, okay, remember, there are students who have not mastered this standard yet. What opportunities are we going to provide for them? So this grade book, it's very communicative to the teacher, the parent, the the students, so that we're all on the same team, going toward that same goal of learning, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Amanda Campos, for joining us today on Teachers Help Teachers, and helping us setting up. Thank you for helping us set up our grade book for mastery learning. Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.